Lila had known Marissa for more than a decade. Their friendship had begun in the aftermath of tragedy, when Marissa's husband, Daniel, had gone missing under mysterious circumstances. Everyone assumed he had drowned on a weekend trip. Marissa never remarried, but she had somehow kept her head high, managing Daniel's old businesses and living alone in his grand estate at the edge of town. When Marissa called and asked Lila to come over, her voice carried an unusual excitement. "Trust me, you'll want to see this," she said cryptically. The mansion felt both familiar and eerie as Lila stepped inside. Marissa's warm smile didn't entirely calm her unease. She followed her friend up the sweeping staircase, into a bedroom that looked different. Fresh curtains, softer tones, small feminine touches everywhere. "I want you to meet someone," Marissa said, brushing her auburn hair from her face. Her tone was light, but her eyes gleamed with something more. Before Lila could ask who, Marissa reached for a tiny silver bell on the table and gave it a delicate ring. The sound was sharp, precise. A moment later, footsteps echoed in the hallway, measured, practiced, almost ceremonial. The door creaked open, and a striking figure entered. A tall woman with jet black hair pulled into a perfect ponytail, dressed in a classic black and white maid uniform, stepped forward. Her skirt flared with every movement, and her gloved hands held the edges as she bowed deeply. "This is Juliet," Marissa said proudly. "She's been with me for several months now. Isn't she wonderful?" Lila's mouth went dry. The woman was beautiful, almost too perfect, her makeup flawless, her smile delicate. But behind her painted lips and carefully fluttered lashes, Lila thought she caught the briefest flicker of fear. Juliet's voice, soft and lilting with a faint French accent, broke the silence. "Enchanting, Madame Lila." The words sent a shiver down Lila's spine. Something about them felt rehearsed. "T. Juliet," Marissa said. With another bow, the maid glided out of the room, her skirts whispering against the floor. The silence that followed was heavy. Lila turned slowly back to Marissa. "What exactly is going on here?" she asked, her voice trembling. Marissa only smiled. A slow, satisfied smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Ah, Lila," she said, folding her hands. "You'll find out soon enough. But let's just say Juliet is not who she appears to be." Juliet returned a few minutes later, balancing a silver tray with delicate teacups. The clink of porcelain echoed through the high-ceiling bedroom as she set the tray down with practiced grace. "Merci, Juliet," Marissa said smoothly. The maid gave a slight curtsy, her eyes lowered. But Lila caught something, just for a heartbeat. A flicker of hesitation in the woman's expression, like she wanted to speak, but quickly swallowed the thought. Marissa noticed too. "Juliet, why don't you show Lila the garden after tea?" she said in a tone that was both kind and commanding. "Yes, madam," Juliet replied softly, her accent thick. Lila wrapped her hands around the warm teacup, trying to keep them from trembling. She had questions bubbling in her throat, but Marissa's watchful smile made her hold them back. Instead, she asked lightly, "Where did you say you met Juliet?" "Oh, abroad," Marissa said breezily, her eyes flicking toward the maid. "She was looking for a new life. I gave her one." The words felt heavy, almost rehearsed, and Lila's unease only deepened. After tea, Juliet led Lila through the mansion's long hallways and out into the sprawling garden. The roses were in full bloom, their fragrance filling the air. The maid walked a few steps ahead, skirts swaying gently with each movement. "You don't have to call me madam," Lila said, trying to ease the tension. "You can just say Lila." Juliet paused. Slowly, she turned her head. Her blue eyes shimmered in the fading light. "It is difficult," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Why?" Lila asked gently. Juliet hesitated, then leaned closer as if afraid of being overheard. Her lips parted as though she was about to say something important, something dangerous. But then, the sharp tinkle of the silver bell rang out from inside the mansion. Juliet froze. Her back stiffened, her eyes darted toward the house. Without another word, she lowered her head, curtsied once more, and hurried back toward the sound. Lila stood rooted among the roses, her heart pounding. Whatever Juliet had been about to say, it had been stopped dead by that bell. She looked back at the empty path, goosebumps rising on her arms. One thing was certain now, Juliet wasn't just a maid. She was trapped. And Marissa held the key. That night, Lila couldn't sleep. The mansion's guest room was elegant but suffocating, the silence broken only by the faint tick of the grandfather clock in the hall. Every creak of the old house set her nerves on edge. She tossed and turned, her mind replaying Juliet's trembling eyes in the garden, the way her words had been cut short by the bell. Difficult. What had she meant? Finally, Lila slipped quietly from bed, pulling a robe around her shoulders. She crept into the hallway, the polished wood cold beneath her bare feet. As she passed the library, she froze. Faint voices, hushed, urgent, echoed from within. Lila leaned closer, pressing her ear against the carved oak door. "I can't keep doing this," a voice whispered. It was Juliet. Her tone was strained, almost breaking. Another voice followed, Marissa's, calm but sharp. "You'll do as you're told. You owe me that much." There was a pause, followed by the unmistakable sound of Juliet sobbing softly. Lila's heart twisted. Something was terribly wrong here. She pushed the door open just a crack. Inside, she saw Juliet standing rigidly in front of Marissa, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. Marissa loomed in her silk nightgown, eyes cold but amused. "You've forgotten who you were," Marissa said in a chillingly gentle tone. "And that's the point. The past is gone. Juliet is all that exists now." Juliet shook her head violently, tears streaking down her cheeks. She stopped mid-sentence, as if the words had jammed in her throat. Marissa tapped the silver bell lightly, almost playfully. Juliet's body stiffened, her resistance fading like smoke. Her voice softened to a trembling whisper. "Oui, madam." The sight made Lila's blood run cold. It was as if Juliet was under a spell she couldn't break. Marissa turned her head suddenly, her eyes flicking toward the door. "Lila," she called softly. "Are you still awake?" Lila's breath caught in her chest. She backed away from the door, forcing herself to sound casual. "Just getting some water," she stammered, retreating down the hallway before Marissa could probe further. Back in her room, Lila leaned against the door, her pulse racing. She finally understood one thing: Juliet wasn't a maid by choice. But the bigger question loomed: who had she been before? The next morning, sunlight streamed through the mansion's tall windows, but it did little to brighten Lila's mood. She sat at the breakfast table, staring at the delicate china in front of her. Marissa chatted casually about business trips and renovations, but Lila barely heard a word. Her eyes kept flicking to Juliet, who moved silently about the room, pouring coffee and refilling dishes with mechanical precision. Not once did she meet Lila's gaze. When Marissa stepped out to take a phone call, Lila seized the moment. "Juliet," she whispered, her voice urgent. The maid froze mid-step, clutching the coffee pot. For a moment, her lips parted as though she wanted to speak. But then her eyes darted toward the hallway where Marissa had gone, and she shook her head quickly. Instead of words, Juliet placed a small folded napkin on the table beside Lila's plate. Then, without looking back, she disappeared into the kitchen. Heart pounding, Lila unfolded the napkin beneath the table. Inside was a scrap of paper with shaky handwriting. "Midnight. East Wing. Do not tell her." Lila tucked it quickly into her pocket just as Marissa returned, her smile as composed as ever. That night, the mansion was once again wrapped in silence. Lila slipped from her room, careful not to make a sound. She found the east wing dimly lit, the wallpaper faded, the air colder here. Juliet was waiting at the end of the corridor, her posture tense. She pressed a finger to her lips, then beckoned Lila inside a small, dusty sitting room. "Please," Juliet whispered in a rush, her accent thinner now, as though it was slipping. "You must believe me, I am not who she says I am." Lila leaned closer. "Then who are you?" Juliet's eyes glistened with tears. She reached beneath the folds of her skirt and pulled out a worn photograph. The edges were frayed, the image slightly faded, but the figure in it was unmistakable, a young man, smiling with a baseball cap tilted sideways, his arm around a group of friends. That was me, Juliet said, her voice breaking. Before all of this. Lila's breath caught. The resemblance was faint, but it was there. The jawline, the eyes, it was the same person. The maid in front of her hadn't always been Juliet. She had been someone else. The photograph trembled in Juliet's gloved hands. She pressed it into Lila's palm as though it burned her to hold it any longer. "That man," Lila whispered, staring at the smiling face in the picture. "That's you." Juliet's lips quivered. "Yes. My name was Jason." The sound of it, plain, ordinary, masculine, clashed violently with the delicate woman standing before her. "I don't remember everything," Juliet said quickly, her words tumbling out in a rush. She made sure of that. "But I remember enough. I had a job, friends, a life." Then Marissa, her breath hitched, and she shook her head, clutching at her temples as though the memories themselves were knives. "Juliet, slow down," Lila urged gently. She placed a steadying hand on her arm. "What did she do to you?" Juliet looked up, her eyes wide and wet. "She rewrote me, piece by piece. She told me Jason had to disappear. That only Juliet could stay." Lila felt a chill crawl down her spine. She thought back to Marissa's words the night before. The past is gone. Juliet is all that exists now. "How long?" Lila whispered. Juliet closed her eyes. "Months. Maybe years. Time slips. Every day feels like a script. I smile when she wants me to. I curtsy when the bell rings. And if I try to fight it," she trailed off, glancing toward the doorway, fear etched in every line of her face. "She finds ways to remind me who's in control." The air in the room thickened with dread. Lila could barely breathe. "You have to leave," she whispered urgently. "You can't stay here." Juliet shook her head violently. "You don't understand. I can't leave. She has my papers, my money, everything." And more than that, she hesitated, her voice dropping to a broken whisper. "She has me trained." The last word sent shivers down Lila's spine. A sudden sound in the hallway made them both jump, the faint chime of the silver bell. Not loud, not close, but unmistakable. Juliet stiffened instantly, her entire posture changing. Her eyes went glassy, her body snapping into obedience, as if on command. "I must go," she said in a soft, mechanical tone. "Wait." Lila grabbed her arm desperately. "Juliet, listen to me. I'll help you. I'll get you out of here. I promise." For a fleeting moment, Juliet's eyes softened, like the real Jason was still in there, fighting to break through. But then she slipped free, smoothing her skirts, her expression reset into polite calm. "Oui, madam," she murmured automatically, and glided out of the room. Lila was left clutching the photograph, her heart hammering. Now she knew the truth. And Marissa could never find out. Lila barely slept. The photograph lay hidden beneath her pillow, its edges digging into her cheek whenever she turned. Each time she drifted into half-sleep, she jolted awake with the image of Juliet's terrified eyes and Marissa's cold smile flashing through her mind. By morning, she had made a decision. She would find a way to get Juliet out.